wars. A French government was slammed into place, but just a few months later, the Italian peninsula discovered the power of friendship and drove the French from the land, bringing it all to a net zero outcome. Although all the neighboring kingdoms and such now knew that the Italians were easy pickings. Charles frigged off back to France with the goal of rebuilding his army to slap the shit out of some more Italians, but was never able to do so. Despite his ambitions and yearning to conquer in the name of the crown, the substantial mountain of debt that he just incurred prevented any future conquests. War is expensive after all. So, unable to make any external changes, he instead looked towards the internal, focusing on cultural expansion and pioneering the French Renaissance. He relished in lavish architecture, the arts, and sports. One particular sport being jeu de paume, or game of the palm. Think tennis, but instead of smacking a ball with a sturdy racket, you did it with your bare hand. Charles just loved watching a bunch of dudes whacking their balls around, but sometimes life's simple pleasures end up cutting that life short. While heading on over to a match on April 7th, 1498, the king accidentally wanged his melon on a stone frame of a low doorway. A temporary moment of embarrassment, but with permanent consequences. The king shrugged it off and continued to watch the game, and everything seemed fine. Until it wasn't. The king collapsed in his seat and fell into a coma. Medical attention was called right away, but King Charles VIII had died just 9 hours later at the age of 27. He left the Kingdom of France fractured and in massive debt. Now, this little mishap is the king's most cited cause of death, but some modern historians claim that neurosyphilis and epileptic fits may have had something to do with it. Luckily, though, the king had 6 whole kids to carry on the family lineage. Oh wait, they all died in infancy. Bummer. Little is really known about Duke Qing of Qin, with limited surviving knowledge of his existence being written in ancient Chinese texts, mainly the famous Zhuochuan, which discusses many ancient Chinese historical figures in the context of moral teachings and symbolism. Well, this poor duke got the short end of the stick with his life lesson. What we do know about dear old Qing was that he was a prominent ruler in the state of Qin during the Eastern Zhou dynasty, somewhere towards the beginning of the 6th century BC. He was regarded as a strong and wise military ruler, having brought peace and cooperation amongst the 6 clans within his own state. All he did was divide the state's existing military into 6 separate branches, one for each of the clans. This kept them happy and loyal, eager to share wisdom and advice on any domestic and foreign affairs to maintain peace. Keep your subjects happy and they won't try to rebel and kill you. Even though he was a man of domestic peace and prosperity, this didn't mean that he couldn't export a few strategic ass-whoopings. His strong military coalition allowed the state of Qin to lay some major smackdowns on neighboring warring states during his reign, asserting dominance within the region. It's just a shame that such a prominent figure would be subject to such a bizarre death. According to the classical Chinese text in the Zhuochuan, Qing was suddenly struck with sickness in the summer of 581 BC. Feeling like complete doo-doo, he consulted with a shaman for advice and a prognosis. And it wasn't good. Instead of any sort of useful medical advice, the shaman instead presented the duke with a grim prophecy. You're gonna die, dude. The shaman informed the duke that he had but a short time to live, specifically that he wouldn't live to feast on the wheat of the new harvest season. The duke did not like that, so he had the shaman executed. As a bit of a fuck you, Qing had some farmers reap an unripe crop of wheat and mash it into flour to make a debatably delicious low-poly cake. Horrible idea. The quote-unquote cake only exacerbated his symptoms, leading to frequent tummy troubles. Such rumblies in his tumbly meant that he had to make a poopy and a potty. So, scrambling to the nearest possible shitter, the duke slammed his cheeks down to make a duke of his own. But the slamming of the cheeks was apparently overly aggressive as he fell right through the seat and into the cesspit below. Already in a weakened state due to illness, Qing was quickly overwhelmed by the rotting slop and drowned in the waste. Now, I know what you're thinking. With bizarre deaths such as this, there's often the suspicion of over-exaggeration or falsehoods, with more reasonable explanations for one's passing being brought up in other texts. However, a few other works of the time also mention this exact event, with 0 other sources even alluding to evidence of foul play or even an uneventful natural demise. So Qing is remembered as the duke that fell into a turlet and done drowned. Pretty shitty. With a name like Stanislav Leszczynski, you know this guy was destined for greatness, and he was, kinda. During the Great Northern War, Sweden was just frothing at the gash for some faithful allies to assist in their defense against Russia and the aptly named anti-Swedish coalition, one of which was the Kingdom of Poland. The current Polish monarch, King Augustus II, was a cool guy and all, but wasn't very supportive of the Swedes, so let's just... there we go. Stanislav, one of the Polish king's most vocal opposers, had been installed on the throne by Sweden in 1704, and his rule remained valid as long as Sweden remained undefeated in the Great Northern War. The Swedish got their fish handed to them in 1709, with their king dethroned and forced into exile. With that, Augustus II politely knocked on the Polish royal doors to reclaim his throne. Sad Stanley was swept to the sidelines, but started to strategize. His beautiful cotton swab of a daughter got hitched to King Louis XV of France in 1725, a critical move of politics and power. With the French king now giving the old to his daughter, Stanislav would have a stronger claim to the Polish throne when the time came. And just like the French king, that time came rather quickly. In 1733, Augustus II had a bit of an embarrassing death himself. He went and snapped off an entire toe when entering a carriage. The wound got infected, which, in pre-modern medical terms, means death. Now, you would think that the throne would be passed down to Augustus' son, right? Wrong. The Polish king unfortunately never made the throne a hereditary inheritance, which was a grave mistake. Instead, the throne was formally up for grabs through a royal election. The winner, of course, was none other than Stanislav Leszczynski, so he was made king. Again. However, Russia, the winner of the whole Great Northern War thing, objected, demanding that the throne be rightfully passed to Augustus' son. Thus, a new war began, the War of the Polish Succession. French and Russian forces proceeded to blow each other to bits in Austria over who should be the rightful Polish king. 2 years and 88,000 deaths later, the two agreed on a ceasefire and Stan was forced to surrender the throne. But in my opinion, he made out on the deal. He had to give up his kingship, sure, but he was made Duke of the territories of Lorraine and Bar, living a wealthy and peaceful life in the comfy, cozy countryside, actively ruling the territories and writing philosophy in his spare time. But during one of his relaxing evenings of spitting poetic flames onto parchment in 1766, tragedy struck. Clad in his iconic silk robes, the now 88-year-old Stanislav nodded off near the fireplace. A rogue spark set his clothing ablaze, waking him up in a panic. The fire seared the old man's already withering flesh, resulting in devastating burns. Luckily, nearby servants rushed in and were able to extinguish the flames, but it was too late. Upon examination by his close friend and personal physician,